Okay, now we're doing this book here. This is called my other book, Prevent and Reverse Hypertension by me, P. Rogers. We're on part number 5. Okay, the next thing we're talking about is the cause of hypertension. So cause number 1 of hypertension, most important, is high-fat diets. What we're talking about now is cause number 2, high dietary sodium. All right, it's the second most important cause. And also I said all the medical schools, their books suck and they're stupid because they tell everybody, 95% of hypertension is essential of unknown cause. Bullshit, okay? It's been well known for a long time. High-fat diets and high sodium are the main causes of hypertension, okay? This is widely known. Anybody with half a brain that's studied knows this is true, all right? But if the patient knew this, then they would just fix their diet and you couldn't sell them anything. But actually, most patients are too lazy and stupid. They're not willing to fix their diet. But you should know, for the people who are willing to, this is your answer right here. What did Kempner do? He put the patients on a low-fat diet with low sodium. Okay, the word for sodium, the abbreviation is Na for natrium. That's Latin word for sodium. So that's why abbreviation is Na. It's got 1 plus positive charge, so it's Na plus. Okay, you're also going to hear a lot of contradictory information on the internet. Oh, I heard high sodium was good for you, bad for you. And there's a lot of liars on the internet, okay, because they get paid money to promote sodium. The food companies want salt in the food because it tastes good, people eat more, and it's a good preservative. Okay, you got to watch out. A lot of times these salts have microplastics in them. That's not good. If you're going to get a salt, you might as well get one with iodine, but be careful too. They sometimes use anti-caking agents that contain aluminum or other bad stuff. I don't add any salt to my food. I don't need it. McDougall used to say you can put a little bit of salt on the outside of the food. That gets people to eat the plant foods. Otherwise, a lot of people won't eat the plant foods. And the biggest poisons in the Western diet, he says, are the animal foods and the oils. So he says those are the major detractors from health. He said the sugar and the salt are just minimal problems. Not a big deal. Me personally, I don't add any salt. Okay, then the thing is, well, why do some say salt is good, we need more? Why do others say, no, we must minimize as much as possible? And the point I'm going to say is it reminds me of the Monty Python and the Holy Grail quote, where they're talking here. I'll just repeat the line from the movie. It says, one of the knights says, the other one, it's not, when one guy was talking about a swallow carrying a coconut, and the other one said, it's not a question of where he grips it, the coconut. It's a question of weight ratios. A 5-ounce bird cannot carry a 1-pound coconut. Okay, so what am I talking about? It's a question of ratios. It's not so much how much sodium you eat. It's how much potassium you eat relative to your sodium. Okay, that's the determining factor. And McDougall would also say, oh, his patients, their blood pressure improves dramatically when they become 100% vegans. And you know what? Without making the effort to change anything, they're simply eating tons of potassium because it's in the plant foods, and they're getting much less sodium because they're avoiding the processed foods. And the way you can remember it is, if you're eating whole plant foods, imagine this ear of the ear protector is a cell, okay? The intracellular part of the cell, these are whole plant foods, so they're intact. And because they're intact, that means they're full of potassium. Remember how I talked about the ions? You have to know this. Think of this first cell forming as a plasma membrane enclosed its space inside the ocean, that life arose in the ocean. God made life in the ocean. The outside ocean is salt water, so it's always high in sodium. The salt water rinses against the rocks, the calcium carbonate, the limestone, and it rinses calcium into the water. So the extracellular fluid always is high in sodium and calcium. Remember that for the rest of your life, that it's the seawater. Extracellular water is the seawater. If you remember that, you will be able to easily learn smooth muscle physiology, cardiac muscle physiology, skeletal muscle physiology, neuronal physiology. It all becomes easy if you remember that. So that's why I'm making a big deal about it. Okay, so what ends up happening, though, is there's potassium inside the cell. In order to life to exist, it has to maintain osmotic gradients across that plasma membrane. The number of ions inside and outside have to match. So in order to do that, it has to pump out the sodium and the calcium in order to allow other things to be in the cell and have a balanced osmolality. Okay, so it's got potassium in the cell. Whole foods have lots and lots of potassium because they contain the intact cell. When you process a food, you smush it, you grind it, and then you rinse it with solvents. You rinse away all the potassium. So you look at the processed food labels, you're going to have sodium really high. You're going to have next to nothing on a potassium. But then you look at the food label on a real food where they haven't done that, you're going to have really high, on a real high plant food, you're going to have really high potassium, really low sodium. Okay, that's what you want. Okay, and then you want to keep the ratio. I would say you'd like it 10 or more. You know, Richard Moore, who wrote the great book, high blood pressure solution. It's a masterpiece. He would recommend at least 5 or more. But he really didn't know nutrition too well, and our ancestors were probably eating 15 to 20 or even 25 times more potassium and sodium. If you look at a fruit, look at the fruits. I went through the list of K factors. I think I already went through it for this book. If I haven't gone through it, I'll go through it soon in this book. The K factors on fruits are typically hundreds of times, 100 to 500 times more potassium than sodium. Like bananas, I think, have like 450 times more potassium than sodium. Okay, and that's pretty typical. All right, the starches are more in the range of about 20 to 100 or so of more potassium than sodium. Okay, and the veggies are only a little more. I forget they were like 5 to 15 or something like that. Whereas the processed foods tend to be the opposite, higher sodium than potassium. Okay, it's the ratio of potassium to sodium that matters. Okay. And that's also the secret of why are black people so hypertensive? Because black people eat tons of processed food. They don't eat that much plant food, okay? That's why they're so hypertensive. There's your answer right there. Okay, the abbreviation for sodium, the scientific abbreviation is K+, and that comes from kalium. It's the Latin word for potassium. And it has a 1+ because it's also 1+ as its charge. We talked about the K factor ratio must be at least 5 to prevent hypertension, but better to have it higher than that. Let's see. This guy, Richard Moore, is a brilliant guy, MD, PhD. Spent his whole life researching hypertension and these membrane potassium pumps. Okay, we'll get into some more of these numbers here. Now, the average modern Westerner eats like more than 2 times more sodium than potassium. They'll say their average intake was 4,000. I think it's higher than that. So at a minimum, and potassium, they'll give them an average of 2,000. I think the gap's actually more like 3 to 1 more sodium than potassium at least. They've messed everything up, okay? So that's why they're hypertensive off the charts. These are the gateway diseases. Most of the patients, almost all of them, they're hypertensive, pre-diabetic or diabetic. That causes atherosclerosis in the heart, the brain, the eyes, the ears, the Johnson, everywhere, okay? And then it ruins their health and their spine, and then they're all decrepit. Again, the typical patient by 60 years of age is cognitively slow. And my internal medicine friends, a lot of them have told me, it seems as if every single patient they have over 60 is mentally slow. So they're not demented yet, they can find their way home, but they're frankly stupid, can't handle any nuance, and essentially hopeless. And they don't get better. Yeah, patients have this idea, oh, well, I'll be okay. I'll just take my pills. I'm doing okay. It's under control. No, you really should fix it as much as you can with diet. Otherwise, you'll probably have a crappy outcome. Most people have bad outcomes. I would consider their outcomes a disaster. Okay, so our ancestors typically had K factors of around 20, whereas the modern American typically has K factors of like 0.4 or less. It's a disaster. Okay, Dennis Burkitt, the great fiberman, Christian missionary to Africa who figured out abdominal pressure syndrome, he said, there is no animal on earth that eats more sodium than potassium, except for modern Western humans. Okay, these are just some paper references if you care. All right, now here's a little bit about Healthspan versus lifespan. Okay, so the point of this graph is that if you eat the SAD diet, most people already have pretty crappy health by the time they're in their late 40s or early 50s. Okay, they're already messed up. I've seen this with a lot of people, from my generation. They get to late 40s, early 50s, they're fat, they're kind of broken down. Guys who are carpenters no longer can really work anywhere near their previous level. I see the doctors kind of turning into sort of fat, lightweight Gomer docs. All right, a lot of docs eat the Mediterranean diet, and they're a little bit better off, so they buy an extra 5-10 years being a little better off. The health span is when they're still pretty robust versus when, after that, when they're kind of fragile and frail and just getting by. Okay, if you're a low-fat vegan, you're likely to be robust much longer. I'm just about 62 years of age. I have no medical problems. I'm fit as a fiddle. I can run up and down 10 stairs like it was nothing. I can do, over 50 good form push-ups easy. Things are going good. I could write a book chapter in one day. I do it all the time. 40 pages ready to go, manuscript ready, biochemistry chapters. So anyways, I just tell you that because a typical 60-year-old is kind of like Uncle Joe's moving kind of slow at the junction. Okay, they're not doing so well. Hypertensive, diabetic, cerebral vascular disease, poor dentition, cataract surgery, GERD, abdominal pressure syndrome, and a whole bunch of other problems. Okay, so that's another reason why you want to be a low-fat vegan, because you want to be healthy as long as possible, not just to live longer, but also to be healthy for all of that time. You know, the Mediterranean diets, they usually start crapping out in their mid-50s, whereas these guys are often going pretty strong till quite a while, you know. As long as they don't do anything stupid or get taken out, they can do really well. You know, typical examples would be like T. Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn, 90 plus. Okay, and I know some have died sooner, but a lot of times there's some unique reason for that. We're not going to go into all that right now. That's a topic for another day. Okay, so there's Healthspan, Lifespan. That's probably a good spot to call it for today on our hypertension talk from that book. All right, so we'll call it a day. I hope you found that helpful.